Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 227 of The Ball is Round. My name is Andy Coronado, and tonight on the show, we're discussing CF Montreal's tie against LAFC and our instant reaction to Roses FC versus Ottawa Rapid FC. As you guys can see, I'm joined tonight by Alex Gange-Ruzik from One Soccer and Northern Football. What's good, man? How you doing?
Good, Andy. Good to see you. It's been a minute. Just
I
happy to
know.
be here and to chat.
I think last time we did this, we were a bit depressed. I think it was the end of the season for CF Montreal, and where are we going to go from here? Now we're in the middle of it all. In the middle of it all, there's a new team. There's Rose FC. What are we doing? And right now, you told me before the show that you're in Vancouver. How are things over there?
Things are good in Vancouver. As you know, the MLS team, the Whitecaps, aren't doing too bad. Top
Ooh,
of the league,
sorry.
Champions Cup final. Lots going on out here. Not something
Uh,
we're particularly used to seeing, and so that's been quite the story. And of course, Vancouver Rise as well. They've launched as well. So we also got a new team on our side.
Yeah, and it's really is it really is. Robbie is saying welcome, Alex, and welcome,
Hello.
Roberto, Robbie. So yeah, we definitely Vancouver's doing well. Alex, every time I go anywhere, any show, they're like, "Sorry, we took so much time speaking about Vancouver." So it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. They're doing good. But just a quick reminder, guys, those that listen to us or watch us before we get started, just a quick reminder that if you listen to a show and like what you hear/see, click on the subscribe button to support The Ball is Round. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us to subscribe to all of our social media platforms for the daily updates. Alex, we have a lot of things to talk about today. A lot of things that happened during the week. We're gonna go ahead and get started with some random topics of the week. Everybody saw well, I'm pretty sure everybody saw. We're going to talk about the Luca Saputo Gabriel Javet interview on BPM Sport with Olivier Brett au fond des filets. And there was also the Canadian Championship game that CF Montreal played versus Forge FC, the first leg, which Marco Donadel described as the longest game that he's ever played because it felt like at the end of the game he was doing a press conference for the first half of one game, which was a really funny way to put it. But that's the way he expressed it. The we last week and we did the show with Elias where CF Montreal got utterly destroyed by Toronto FC, by TFC 6-1 at home. I don't know if you caught that, Alex, but if you didn't, good. But it was just horrible. So obviously a much needed win against what is considered a lower team in the CPL with Forge FC. Yes, in Hamilton. But CF Montreal lost. They lost 1-0. In a game that I can honestly say that in the first half was flat. There was no energy. There was no. It almost felt like the 6-1 just kind of rolled over into in the Tuesday night game, and yeah, there was not much. And then maybe at the end they tried to do something out of it, but it really wasn't much out of it. Did you get to catch that? Did you get to see a little bit of what happened in that game? What did you think of the game of that midweek game?
Yeah, for Montreal, it was definitely a tough day. For Forge, it was an excellent performance. I was very impressed with what they showed, but I think it kind of showed where both teams are at. With Montreal, they looked like a team without confidence. The way, they just the first 30 minutes they sat back completely. Forge were just playing the ball around, and then even as the game went on, and Montreal sort of started to find their feet. Anytime they put anything out, Forge had an answer, and in the end, Ford get a pretty deserved 1-0 victory. If anything, we wondered if they could have made it 2 or 3-0 with how they played throughout the game. It was definitely tough to see, I think, from Montreal's perspective, because like you mentioned, on paper, this is a game where they're favorites. This is still, an MLS where you got the pedigree, the history. You're playing a league that is still just 7 years old. At the same time, Forge was the worst possible team for them to be playing because Forge knows them so well, and Forge
Mhm.
has beat them before. And for them, Forge are probably looking at the notion of Montreal being favorites and almost feeling insulted by it. And I think they kind of played with a bit of that chip on their shoulder. So definitely not the team Montreal wanted to see right after that Toronto loss. And I think the result in the end showed it.
Yeah, absolutely. There was very little to, as you said, just probably not the best game to be able to bounce off of that after such a terrible loss and on such a short week. And Marco Donadel I want to say, I want to use the word complained. He kind of complained about how, what the game, the way it was set up and how it was done, and having to wait 2 months and everything. I mean, at the end of the day, you knew this at the start of the season. Why are we complaining today, right? So it's definitely something. And props to Forge FC, because that goal that they scored, the 1-0, was excellent. It was very well played, and it was very, very well, organized. And I just thought, wow, they this Forge team is really showing up against this MLS team. They are not backing down. They are well aware that this there's two legs to this, and they are showing up. They said that we're gonna give it our best at home, because you never know what's gonna happen in Montreal. So definitely not the kind of bounce back game you wanted from CF Montreal. And Alex, I don't know if you agree with me, but it almost felt, the way I saw it, almost felt like CF Montreal kind of matched Forge's level. It almost feels like they matched their intensity, in the sense that, like, okay, now we're playing you guys, we're gonna match your intensity. And I don't say this in a good way for CF Montreal. I think they should play at an MLS level. I don't think they should be going down to Forge level. But it almost felt like, you know what, we're in this competition now, we're gonna go to this level. How do you think of that matchup? Did CF Montreal play like an MLS team on Tuesday night?
Well, I feel like you'd almost, maybe intensity is not the right way to put it, but I agree that Montreal, I think they didn't bring the right energy. And I think that's where they got hurt by Forge, because, Montreal was maybe thinking, you come into this game, oh, this is going to be, we'll get on the ball a lot at least. Forge will sit back, they're going to invite you to play. And Forge are like, no, like this is, and I think, again, that's where something where Forge is kind of unique, because Forge has played so many MLS teams now. They've played Montreal a bunch of times. They've played Toronto. They've been in the Champions Cup. They've seen the Mexican teams. They've been in CONCACAF. For them, this is, another game where they want to go out and play their style. And I think that's where Montreal kind of got caught out, because Montreal kind of expected that the ball was just naturally going to sit for them, that it was going to be them who controlled the game. And Forge kind of forced them to play the way Forge wanted to play. And I think Montreal were never really able to match that. So it is definitely right to say that Montreal didn't hold themselves as an MLS team, and they didn't really hold themselves as their own team, right? Like, we
Oh,
didn't see CF Montreal, I think, is the way I would see it. And I think in these cup ties, especially against a team like Forge, and I think you even saw it with the Whitecaps Valor game and the other matchup. So I guess Montreal's not alone in that regard, is that, we have to remember that for some of these CPL teams, this is a huge match. This is the big match of their season. They want to play up. And sometimes it can be easier to find that energy to play up to that game. Whereas, for these teams, it's, you don't want to slip on the banana peel. And I think Montreal played like they were scared of slipping on the banana peel.
I think it also has to do with the expectations, because the president, Gabriel Gervais, of the team at the beginning of the season, Alex, said, we want to win a trophy this year. And it was very much targeted at the Canadian Championship. This is why these kind of games, I think this is why this loss weighs a little bit heavier on the fans, is because the statement was clear. And this is why a lot of people believe that Gabriel Gervais is coming out to the media tomorrow, to we don't know if it's announcements, we don't know if it's just to kind of like chit chat, we have no idea. But because this is supposed to be one of the most important competitions of the season, and you're already down 1-0, not the end of the world, but it could have been a lot worse, honestly, Alex. The score doesn't do it justice at the kind of game that Forge played against CF Montreal. You're absolutely right to compare it to the Vancouver game, but the Vancouver has another reality, luckily for them, right? They're in a whole different position than CF Montreal, who are almost dead last, and have very little to no hope for the next few for this season. So definitely a very, very tough game to watch. What's next? They got a second leg. I mean, CF Montreal has a must win. How does Forge approach this for in 2 months now, in July? This game.
Yeah, the schedule is ridiculous. I mean,
So weird.
it sucks, because I think a lot of it becomes on the shoulders of some MLS loving midweek game. I hate it. It'd be nice to just have it this week and just get it over with. But the scary thing, I think, if you're Montreal, is that Forge has experience in this. Last year, in fact, they carried a worst result after leg 1-1 with away goals favored Montreal, and Forge went out and got the job done at Studs Up. So I think that's kind of scary for Montreal, because Forge has had a few experiences now. on CONCACAF, going down to Monterrey, going down to Chivas, Guadalajara last year. Both times they, of course, they didn't advance, but I think they've had those experiences of going to away legs. Last year as well, they had against Toronto FC where they were up and they went to BMO Field, and that loss really hurt them. The one at BMO Field, the 1-0, because they felt they should have gotten a result and made that final. They felt TFC did not deserve to get through the way they did. So I think with Forge, they have this experience, and the fact that they have a 1-0 lead, they're going to come in with a good balance of, okay, you're not going to go out and go crazy, but they know that if they can get a second goal and really put Montreal under pressure, there might be a bit of that deja vu of, oh, is this happening again from last year?
Which if they've done, as you mentioned last year, they've done. I was at that game, at that second game in Saputo. Oh boy, it was ugly. It was a rainy night, and it was just
There was a
everything was wrong.
thunderstorm delay too, right?
There was a
It
good
added to the.
delay, and it was just the mood of the stadium was just like, what are we doing right now? This is not normal. This game, it just, anyways, don't want to look back at that, because obviously we got to focus on the future. Speaking of the future, big interview this week. Alex, Luca Saputo and Gabriel Javet gave an interview on BPM Sport au fond des filets with Olivier Brett during the week, where they spoke about the state of CF Montreal and what the future is looking like for the club. What were some of your takeaways? Again, we did speak a little bit about it before the show, but what were some of your main takeaways from that interview?
Yeah, I mean, I know for in Montreal it was important to hear, I guess, some of the hierarchy talk, right? Because it's just we haven't heard as much from Gabriel Gervais, or we haven't heard from Lucas Puda really at all, if not, because he's just kind of
Just
been
a newspaper article. Yeah,
exactly the mystery man over in Bologna, so to speak. But no, I think it was just kind of interesting to see what they thought of this team. Of course, it's tough from their perspective because this sporting project, I think they would, it'd be foolish to suggest they're happy with where CF Montreal is at right now. Like, this is a pretty tough start to the season. Feels like, depending on what happens with the Canadian Championship, that is their season. But, just talking about what they said about the philosophy, how the budgets are, getting some of the more insight on that, what they think of the playing squad, the fact that they're, pretty happy with a lot of that. I think that was all, very interesting to just maybe hear their perspective. On the flip side, maybe there's some questions left unanswered, in sense of, how does Montreal see themselves getting out of this? How do you get more youth development, et cetera? I was maybe left wanting a little bit more on that, but it was interesting to hear the way they were talking about the team that they've built, and kind of double down on that sense, because, hey, at the end of the day, they know where this project is at, and I think that they themselves know this is not where it should be at this stage, for sure.
Yeah, and it definitely, I think you pinpointed it really well, where there were a lot more questions left to be answered than actually answered, but they did kind of give us some hints. Like, I think that I would have liked to maybe see a mea culpa. That's what I was looking for. Where they, like you said, right? We messed up. Recruiting was a mess. We really, call it a transition year if you want, Alex. Like, call it we messed up, and we're gonna get rid of a bunch of contracts, trade people, whatever it is. We messed up, but they didn't. They didn't do it. They just said, Luca Saputo in his own way said, "I'm learning," and just like, and he looked at Olivier. He said, just like, I'm sure you in the past 20 years, if you look back, you probably see things that you would have liked to do differently. He's right. Don't we all? Like, we all look back and think of things we could have done differently, but in no way does it like kind of give that, like, okay, well, this season is still not good. No, they said that. I think Gabriel Javet was the one that said, if we're mathematically we still have some hope to get to be able to qualify for the championship or get some wins, then we still believe. One thing that he did mention, though, is that he wants to spend. Lucas Saputo is going to be moving full time to Montreal as of June. Which, I mean, I said this on my ex account. I said, maybe I'm the kind of guy that's naive or glass half full. I don't know what you may call it, but I see that as a positive sign that he's going to be here. And he also said one thing, Alex, that stood out to me. He said, I want to see CF Montreal go back to the Montreal Impact that I knew, that the team that I knew growing up, the success and so to me that kind of shows his sign, shows his view of where he wants CF Montreal to be and how he wants it to be done. So, what did you get that same impression, maybe, or was that nothing much to you when you hear the kind of Luca Saputo say that?
Well, I think it is important to note that, yeah, him coming, like, it means something in the sense that a lot of this recent downturn really kind of started when Joey Saputo started going, spending more time in Bologna and being less involved. I don't. Of course, there was his interview in Italian. What was about a month ago now, and then he's saying, "Oh, back in the day, people didn't like my involvement," and I guess it leads to the point of, hey, like it or hate it, at least he was involved. At least he was, trying to care. And I think that's the hardest thing as a fan when you're watching your team struggle and there's kind of no leaders there to front facing getting, so I think from that perspective, the fact that Luca Saputo will be around, it helps. I think leaders, you kind of have to be there, you have to be within that. I think maybe it'll help also kind of realize the scale of what needs to be done, because I think that's the one thing that, again, in terms of things left unanswered, is it just kind of feels like they were very focused on, like, not even right now, the past. And I think right now the past has to go away. Like
Yep.
you can't be thinking about what went wrong under Laurent Courtois. Laurent Courtois is no longer around. You can't be thinking about the Wilfred Nancy days. Those are, forget about it. Those are way in the past. Now
Yeah.
you have to be thinking about, okay, you have a team now. There is a blueprint. Like, there is a blueprint. They mention it and they hint at it. Well, the Philadelphia Union, the Vancouver Whitecaps. They weren't going to say it out loud, but there was at one point Gervais kind of mentioned, he's like, there are teams in the league that don't spend as much and we want to be like them. Well, for example, if you want to be like the Whitecaps, you got to invest in youth development. There's a certain level of transfers you have to develop. Maybe I'll poke a bit of a hornet's nest, but I know with MLS Next Pro, I know that's a huge topic in Montreal. In Vancouver, they use that very arduously in terms of getting prospects in and pushing them up through that team. Well, Montreal, if they want to use that model, I know the Philadelphia Union does the same. I think that was something that also stood out, is that they're kind of hinting at, we know what kind of project we want to be. Well, there's certain tangible steps that need to be taken that haven't. And are there any plans? We haven't really seen any hint of that.
Yeah, and to kind of counter argue that, because you're right, absolutely, these clubs do have success, and it does work. It's worked with the Columbus Crew as well. They've used it really well. Laurent Courtois came from the Crew too, but he actually really built from the ground up a Crew too. But that's not the point. The point being is that is used. But they said that this was not that in the same interview. I think Gabriel Chavez said it a few months back, maybe at the beginning of the season, where he actually said that they've studied like the kind of level of play of MLS Next Pro and, say, the USL and CPL, and they said the level of play compared to MLS Next Pro and the CPL USL, we find that the loans are better than actually investing in an MLS Next Pro.
Well, the
I
thing is,
mean, yeah,
it's true it's true, right? Like, that's not wrong from him, but at the same time, I think what stands out is, if you want to, sending these guys on loan is great for the players, because I get to see some of these guys in CPL, like Biello. I think he's been growing slowly and surely at Halifax. There's a few others, but when you have a second team, it all of a sudden helps your team, because you're creating a platform where these guys can go from within your system, right? They're playing the same way. What's different is he might be going to a system in Halifax where he plays a certain way and he comes back, because that's what happened with Sean Rea, right? Sean Rea was fantastic in the CPL. He looked great, and then he came back and he just never fit in CF Montreal. And I think that's something where, again, it's maybe misunderstanding, because he's right, but also that doesn't help the problem of pushing young talents to the first team.
Absolutely. It just feels like the important moves that they've made with signing like Owen Graham Roach or Alexander Guboglo from the MLS Academy, from the Impact Academy. It almost makes it seem like they want to treat that academy as their MLS Next Pro. And they're making important moves this year to do that, to give these youngsters. I mean, Owen Graham Roach is 16 years old, and he's getting some MLS minutes. Can you tell he's young? I mean, he played last night as well, I believe, the last few minutes. Can you tell he's young? Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about the game yesterday a little bit later, but it is important moves that they're making of transitioning that academy, and one of the Saputo brothers, Simone, is taking care of the academy and the super draft. And so it's kind of like you said, it is the MLS Next Pro does seem like a solution, but they're trying to find like maybe an alternative that like we don't necessarily have to invest that money. But I don't know, maybe Luca Saputo being a little bit closer to a club might change some ideas, and we'll see. But let's go ahead and talk about the game of last night. CF Montreal played against LAFC, with the stars, Alex, because LAFC has the stars and the celebrity, the Olivier Giroud, the Hugo Lloris. I mean, I last night after the game, I was telling some of my cousins that don't follow necessarily CF Montreal so close, but they love soccer, and I was like, yeah, I got to see Hugo Lloris and Olivier Giroud play, and they were like, oh, they're here. There's an MLS. I was like, yeah, whoa, because they know them. They're big names. They're from. So, anyways, they came over.
Well, funny
Olivier,
story. Sorry, not to cut you off, but funny
yeah.
story. LAFC came to Vancouver about 3 weeks ago. Olivier Giroud didn't even play. He just warmed up, stayed on the bench the entire game, and didn't play. So at least you got to see him play.
No, well, I mean, Olivier Giroud did play, but I think he spent more time signing autographs than actually playing. But I mean, he scored a goal against CF Montreal, so give him that. He gave the tying goal. We'll talk about that. So let's. We talked a little bit about Forge FC. Now I want to kind of compare the TFC game, which CF Montreal lost 6-1. Forge FC game, they lost 0-1, and yesterday they tied 2-2. Do you think there's a positive or negative trend between these three games? Because if you think about it, a week, if we forget those two, and Elias told me he went on the show and said we need to forget Toronto ever happened and just focus on Columbus, the 2-2, going up against these big teams. And LAFC it's not necessarily a bad team. I mean, they tied in El Tráfico 2-2 against LA Galaxy, the last place team, 2-2 or 1-1, I forgot. But then CF Montreal also tied them up, leading 2-0, and then obviously we'll get a little bit later into that. Then they ended up giving up 2 goals. Do you see this as a positive trend or a negative trend for this CF Montreal team when you look at those score lines?
Yeah, I mean, well, the Toronto game, like you mentioned, I think Elias put it well if you said forget it. Because at the same time, there were, like, as bad as it was, at the end of the day, red card, and then I think a very naive adjustment to the red card, right? That happens. That's football. 6-1, those games happen. This 2-2-1, it's tough. I guess it depends if you're glass half full, glass half empty, because I think the fact they go up 2-0, that's important. That's kind of been a big issue. I think of Columbus a few weeks ago. I thought Montreal played phenomenal. 1-0, but then they didn't get the 2-0, and that's what hurt them. But in this game, they get the 2-0, and defensively, they're not able to keep it shut. I think that is the big worry, I guess, for me, that like with this Montreal team. And I think that's, if you're going to look at a trend, is that things seem to snowball, and that's never a good sign. Because look, I think the reality is with like soccer and this sport is that momentum, ups and downs are going to happen. No team in the world has figured out how to be good for an entire season. Every team has their bad games. Every team has their bad moments. But the good teams, I think the difference I've come to learn, and I think especially I've seen this with the Whitecaps, because just close to home, when you have bad games, you still get points. When you have bad moments, they don't hurt you. Heck, last night the Whitecaps went down 2-0. They looked awful. But then they win 3-2 because they're like, all right, that's not us flushing. I think with Montreal right now, it's kind of the opposite. When your confidence is low, you can be riding high. You can be up 2-0. And all of a sudden LAFC scores and your back is against the ropes and you're just slipping. And then next, it slips away from you. And I think that's the feeling I'm getting with this Montreal team, is that they're almost stepping on their own feet. It was the same thing against Forge, where, you know what? Forge were outplaying them and it was 0-0 till late in the game. If Montreal leaves that game with 0-0, you're not mad, right? Like, fine, leg one of a cup game, you flush it out. Montreal, same thing against Toronto. You're down 1-0, you get a red card. You lose 1-0. Heck, maybe you draw 1-1. Again, you're laughing, you're happy with it. Columbus, if you can get a win out of that game where you play so well. I think with Montreal, it feels like they need a perfect game to win, and that was New York City. But other than that, they haven't gotten that enough, and I think that's kind of led them to this predicament.
Yeah, and that's something. And we're gonna go ahead and look at the. I'm gonna pull up the lineup for CF Montreal last night. So on the top we had Giacomo Vrioni, Prince Owusu, We had Fabian Herbers, Samuel Piet, and Nathan Saliba as a double pivot in the midfield. We had Dante Sealy on the right hand side. Left hand side, Luca Petrasso. On the center back, we had Jalen Neal, George Campbell, and David Bugai. Now, Robbie put an interesting comment. He said, once we go to our bench, the quality on the field really drops. That kind of sounds, Alex, like the theme of the game. Honestly, it felt like yesterday, as you said, CF Montreal went to up 2-0, and it's actually funny. We were in the press box, and some of the reporters were saying, when we were up 2-0, they were like, "Oh, this happened last year with Miami. Went to Miami, we were up 2-0. Then they flipped it around to 3." And they were going back and forth. I was like, guys, enjoy the moment. We're up 2-0. CF Montreal. When was the last time we said we're up 2-0 this early in the game? They were like, "Yeah, that's true. We haven't had this feeling in so long," and it was just like a bad joke because they ended up coming back. So, but the point being is, CF Montreal hasn't seen been up 2-0 in a very, very long time, and haven't shown that kind of dominance in a game against what I believe is a very good LAFC team. But there's a problem. Because similar to Columbus, you're holding on a lead, you're playing really well, and I am going to use the words that they are dominating the game in every sense. LAFC was frustrated; they couldn't complete a pass. Yes, they had some opportunities, but then it went nowhere. But then you get to the point of the game where players start getting tired from both sides. And LAFC, Columbus, they can go to their bench and the level stays the same. Sometimes it goes higher with subs, or sometimes it stays the same. But for CF Montreal, when you go to the bench, it's a drop. And it's not just a little drop. It's a big drop from the quality of play that you had from the starters. That, to me, is an issue. And we can go back to the recruiting in the offseason. We won't. I don't know if we'll win anything by going back that far back, but I'm sure you see this in Vancouver, Alex, with the Vancouver Whitecaps. Is the moment you go to the bench, you always have that player that is going to do this at that level. Is going to continue play. You might even have a player in the bench that you say every time that player comes in, we know that this side is going to go much better or whatever. CF Montreal, you take out George Campbell and you put in Brandon Craig, and you're like, what are we going to get from Brandon Craig? Brandon Craig just gave up a goal against Forge FC, the 1-0. So what would you say about that maybe drop in performance from the bench? When like how can CF Montreal maybe get around doing this? Get around to maybe improving on this?
Yeah, that's tough, because I think with Montreal too, it ends up being a big weakness, because for Montreal, the fact they don't have any, and there's only one DP, there's maybe not some of the high-end quality players on a roster. That can be a strength, right? If you have the depth, because, okay, you don't maybe have a star, you can rotate more, you can bring on guys off the bench who are, there's not like a huge drop-off because you're bringing off your $10 million DP and bringing on a draft pick, right? And I think for Montreal, that also stands out, but it is a tough thing, because I think I look at Montreal's bench and like it's not like they also brought on Caden Clark and Tom Pierce, right? Like those aren't I know they're having tough seasons, but they aren't bad players. But I think that's kind of the issue sometimes when you're on a bad team, is that everything can look a little worse than it is, and it becomes down to confidence. It comes down to, because the funny thing is, because you asked about the Whitecaps, a lot of guys this year that are getting a lot of love from the Whitecaps, right? Like one is Ralph Priso. He's been very good this year for the Whitecaps. Last year, people are kind of talking to him the same way you just kind of spoke about a Craig or a Clark. He was kind of struggling off the bench for an impact, and all of a sudden, new coach, new confidence. He looks like a brand new player. So sometimes that's why I think it's hard. And I think this is where it's tough for Marco Donadel coming in as an interim head coach for a team already struggling with confidence. For him, he has the task of figuring out what an 11 is first before he even work with the subs. I think it's clear that there's maybe a lack of confidence amongst the players in this squad, and that shows itself in certain ways where they're coming off the bench. And on good teams, when guys come off the bench, they know they have a task. They're going out to win a game, and maybe these guys coming off the bench are they don't know what role they are. They don't know where they fit in the team, and it kind of shows with how they're playing. Because yeah, it's a huge problem, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and usually that kind of sub that you're talking about would have been a Kid and Clark. A Kid and Clark coming in would have made the last year would have made the stadium go up and clap and say, "Oh my God, here goes a goal scoring. Here goes the opportunities." But to me, in my opinion, since the start of the season, Caden Clark specifically, we're focusing on Caden Clark amongst other players, has simply not lived up to what he was last year. A lot of people are saying it's because Joseph Martinez isn't there. Joseph Martinez, without Joseph Martinez, Caden Clark is nothing. I don't know. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's a position doesn't exist. Maybe he's meant to be. I know he's had issues in the past and other teams finding, his feet, I guess, or finding his game in any of the teams or has struggled. But with CF Montreal at this present moment, when CF Montreal needs a scorer, needs those opportunity, creative midfielders that creates those chances when there are, because LAFC did seem vulnerable at times. He's a high energy player. He's a high energy guy that can really, disturb defenders. But it's just to me he seemed like a shadow of himself. Like it's weird to see from such a impact player from last year. So was there? We looked at the lineup. What takeaways did you have from the game besides what we talked about the drop? Was there any maybe positive outcomes? What did you see from the game?
Yeah, I think otherwise it is good to just see maybe Vrioni and Owusu get goals, because I think that's going to need to be key for this team to maybe have a reliable source of goals. And maybe it's one of them, maybe it's both of them together in a platoon. Vrioni's the real question mark for me, just because, of course, he had the injury to start the year. Because he looks like when the ball falls to him around goal, there's something there. And I
Yeah.
think the fitter he's getting, he's starting to get more chances. And because with the Wusu, it's tough because it was the same problem with him at Toronto. He gets into good positions. It's just, some days he'll finish them and he'll look great, and some other days it's just not his day. But Vrioni really seems like there's a certain, bit of quality about him. I love the finish he had on that first goal, to just take it and find that corner. That's a couple nice goals from him now. I think perhaps having a guy who can lead the line and bring a bit of confidence will help those around him. Maybe that's what Caden Clark needs, right? Maybe that's what some of these other attackers who are struggling need, is a confident number 9 to lead the way. Because I look at the rest of the Montreal team, a lot of guys are struggling, in certain positions like the back line, in the midfield. At the same time, I think there's good play. Like I look at that Montreal midfield, I like Saliba, Piet, Latourie. Those are all guys I think that can, on the right day in the right system, they can do a job. You look at the back line, I think there's enough pieces. I really like Jaden Neal. I thought every time I watched him for the Galaxy the last few years, very good defender. I think between him, I think if Joel Waterman, maybe he just needs this break. Maybe he needs to go with the national team to remember the sort of level he can play. I think there's pieces there, but for me, the question heading into this year, and so far this year, has been the attack, and it is encouraging to see the strikers maybe show a bit of form in this game.
And you speaking of the striker, Patrick actually had a question for us. Why do you think they keep subbing Vrioni out and always have Owosu playing 90? Patrick tells us, I think it's time to start doing the opposite. I mean, can't disagree. I mean, you mentioned right the skill level. I agree with Patrick. I think it's different, but this team, CF Montreal, has put a big focus on managing the minutes because they're very scared of players that are coming back from injury or are known to have a history of injury. So they're being very careful at the cost of reducing their attack potential. What do you think, Alex? Do you think he's right that you should at this point put him at 90 minutes regardless of anything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, as soon as he's fit, I think he looks like he's going to be the main man up front. And yeah, I think then the solution is, do you go 2 up front, right? Is it going to be Owusu, Vrioni together? Do you maybe have Vriona and Owusu kind of come in? But I definitely agree. It feels like Vrioni has shown the more quality. It's just like you mentioned, fitness, and that's tough because there's the coin of you can start playing him more. What if he gets injured? Then you're kind of back to square zero, and that's also the risk you don't want to take, because it is still early enough that maybe about 2 to 4, 6 weeks more of Veroni getting up to fitness, and if he finds his feet as the summer hits, I think you'll be in an even better position.
I feel like players and some people are continuously saying that it's still early, but why does it feel like it's getting later now? It's
Well, it's
getting
almost the
already.
halfway mark. It's already game
Yeah,
14.
so we can't have that speech anymore of it's
Well,
early.
you
It's
can in
still
MLS. Unfortunately, you can in MLS with the playoffs.
I
It might
got you.
be
I
too
got you.
early
Okay.
for the supporter shield, but in terms of playoffs, it is still too early, which I hate because I think too many teams make the playoffs. But that's a whole
Got
other
you.
discussion for another day.
So just to finish on the CF Montreal, well, no, not to finish. Just one last question about the game. CF Montreal gave up. We discussed it, right? CF Montreal gave up a 2-goal lead, which looks bad at home, right? It does. That's just be honest. In any team, not just because it's CF Montreal, but any team that gives up a 2-goal lead is bad. But this was against LAFC, which, similar to the Crew, are a very, very good team. They're well coached. They have a lot of talent. They have DP players, well known players. Do you think this tie, a 2-2 tie, and them coming back to score 2 goals, is as bad as people make it seem to be, Alex? Or do you think CF Montreal should be kind of given a break? Like, you guys ended up a tie with LAFC.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's all. If you consider the context, it's not the end of the world. And I say that because at the end of the day, if you're going to drop points, it's better to do it against a Western Conference team than an Eastern Conference team. At least you didn't give away that point to someone who might be fighting with for a playoff spot in a couple months, right? It's someone LA, you forget about it. It's more of a bonus point. I think, like you mentioned, it is a good team. I think it's something if you'd ask people heading into it, a draw against LAFC, they take it.
Yeah.
On the flip side, there's context, right? Like you mentioned, giving up a lead always hurts, no matter the level, no matter who you're against. Because once you have 2 goals for your professional team, that feels like something you want to be able to keep. But I do think there are some reasons where I think the only factor that hurts is at home. If this was on road, this would have been you're laughing. The fact that it is at home, it does hurt because with Montreal playing so many away games early, you do have to bank your points at home. And it does hurt to see them drop a few at home in a row. And I think that's also something that maybe will be why fans are a little more angry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess making it at home does add a little bit more salt to it, just like the TFC 6-1 red card loss
Mm-hmm.
at home. That hurt just saying it. So speaking of superstars, CF Montreal has another midweek game against Lionel Messi led Inter Miami. Does CF Montreal stand a chance?
Oh boy. So I'd say what I'll
I'm just
say about
asking the question, man. Does CF Montreal stand a chance at
what I'll
away?
away too, it's tough. What I'll say is they have a chance to score because that Miami defense is everyone's scoring against them right now. It's been funny to see. Just I mean, what was it like 4-3 against the Union recently?
Yeah.
Minnesota got 4. The Whitecaps had 5. It's been a free for all for everyone playing Miami. But I think the big worry is if Montreal is struggling, conceding 6 against Toronto, conceding against Forge, LA. You could figure that they might concede 3 or 4 against Miami. And I think that's the problem. Because do you have the confidence that Montreal is going to score 3 or 4? So I think it's going to be very tough to get a win out of this one.
I mean, I think people were celebrating that they scored 2 yesterday at home, so that's just kind of where we're at right now. Robbie says no, we don't stand a chance. Robbie's always positive in the show, so yeah, I mean, like you said, Inter Miami is a kind of a box of surprises right now because they are filled with. I mean, Lionel Messi. What are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? Already last year they came to Montreal and beat CF Montreal at Saputo 3-2, but CF Montreal did beat without Lionel Messi, which I don't know if they're managing his minutes right now. I have no idea because it's also a short week for him and for their players. But hopefully, just to give CF Montreal a chance, they do manage his minutes, but they did manage to beat him last year 3-2 in Miami. So hopefully, they as you said, they score a few goals, and at the end of the day, they score more goals than Inter Miami. That's the hope, right? But at this
It's not
point,
going to be a 1-0. I'll say that for sure. It's not going to be a 1-0.
somebody's gonna score 4. We're just not sure who. But but no, it is the team that needs confidence, and this could be a big boost of confidence for CF Montreal if they get any kind of positive result out of it. It really could. So we'll see what happens. But I think we're done with the CF Montreal because obviously we have 2 topics we want to talk about. We want to talk about CF Montreal and Roses FC. So just before we move on to Rose FC, quick reminder to click on the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to us from. If you like what you hear, make sure to follow us on all social media platforms for daily updates for everything CF Montreal, Rose FC, and Canada Soccer. While you're at it, make sure to also follow Alex on social media on Blue Sky because he was so kind to join us today. One follower subscription to our Patreon helps out the show to grow a lot. So we're going to move on. Rose FC, we have their starting lineup for today's game, what ended up being a tie against Ottawa Rapid FC. We had at goalie, we had Lambert. On defense, we had Hill, Leas, Jody Smith, and Schenk on the right back. We had Whitaker, Hess, Ra at the midfield because Bibo is out with a concussion. Megan Sauve, Abdou, and Thibault in the front. Um, yeah. So what would you think? I mean, look, they've had two games now, right? They've had two games where no, I believe it's three games before this one that they have not won, and I don't believe they've scored either, if I remember correctly. So kind of a needed win. I was actually there on the Wednesday night against the AFC Toronto. Yeah, the Roses FC came out kind of flat in that game, in my opinion. They in home turf they seem to struggle against a very their defense was looking very vulnerable as well. um how important was this game for Roses FC to maybe get back on the get back on it, get back on their winning ways that they started the season, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it was big because they were the best team in the league for the first few weeks. They looked incredible. I got a chance to see them live when they came to Vancouver. They demolished the Rise. It was like 3-1, and the Roses looked incredible. But I think the tough thing is, especially in a new league, and also the tough thing is this is a 6-team league. You're seeing everyone 5 times this year. So
Yeah,
maybe you catch them by surprise the first 4 or 5 games. All of a sudden, you're seeing Toronto for the second time. Toronto weren't happy with Montreal kind of going into their place, big crowd, and they sneak away with a 1-0 win on opening weekend. I think teams were starting to adjust. You add up some injuries too. There's some tough absences, like you mentioned, in midweek with Bilbao. Also, no Tanya Boychuk. I thought she's been very good to start the year, and someone that perhaps is missed in this game because the connection she's had with Latifa Abdu. Those two have been so dynamic. So yeah, this was big. Ottawa's been in good form. They've been a team that's really impressed me on the road. And it's tough for Montreal because for 92 minutes, they were so close to getting a big result out of it. But in the end, a bit of a tough ending, but still a road point. Keeps them atop of the table, which is always encouraging because I know the Rise had climbed over them after a big week of their own.
yeah, and I actually in the post game conference. Sorry, just wanted to make sure I said her name right. I was looking at the post game conference for AFC Toronto on Wednesday, and Esther Okoronkwo, who had a fantastic game, scored a banger. Um, she was like, "Je parle pas beaucoup français, mais ça sent bien de gagner ici." And so she said, "I don't speak a lot of French, but it feels great to win here." And it's obviously like, oh, that's so nice, but it's also not a Montreal player, right? It's a Toronto player. So yeah, and I mean the coach said at that point that this really didn't, this wasn't a revenge game. This is just from the first game that we played them to today. We've just gotten better. And this is something with Elias that we discussed on the show. We said, when Roses FC were still winning, their games, we said it's really nice now, as you said, in Vancouver. It was really nice the way they played. They seemed high energy. They seemed like they really knew what they were doing. The system was working well. High press was surprising everybody. But there was going to come a time, Alex, when the rest of the teams in the league were going to get in that fit shape. We're going to learn Montreal's preferred strengths and weaknesses, whatever it may be. How is Montreal going to adjust when we get to those games? I don't think anybody thought they would get to those games that quick. We're 7 games in now, and CF Montreal, Roses FC has kind of struggled to kind of gain back their identity. And as you mentioned, Tanya Boychuk is gone. So we're gonna break down the game. Let's talk about the attack, right? Because on the attack, as I mentioned, when we had in the lineup, we had Latif Abdou a little bit up, playing maybe that Tanya Boychuk role. We had Megan Sauve on the left and Thibault. What'd you think of the attack today against Ottawa?
Yeah, I mean, Abdu, is always going to be kind of dangerous. The way she kind of finds those spaces. At the same time, we've seen so far earlier, it helps to have a boy check up front because that kind of allows, because Abdu, she kind of, it's funny, she looks like a striker, she's big like a striker, but she's kind of one of those players that likes to drift out wide and find those pockets. And I think that's something where having a boy check allows her to do that, because if you're a center back, you kind of have to focus on boy check, and then all of a sudden Abdu pops up and you're like, oh shoot. Whereas when it was kind of Abdu, I think Ottawa did a good job of just kind of tracking the runs. And I think when that happens as well, Sauve, who's a very, creative player, she's kind of similar. She likes to find those pockets. And I do, feel like maybe Montreal lacked a bit of a box threat without a boy check. And I think that's why the only goal comes off a set piece. But I think that also that shows the challenge that Montreal have with their attack is, okay, if you're going to have no boy check, how do you replicate that box threat? Because Abdu, very creative goal scorer, that's not going to be her role, and I think that's going to be something to watch going forward.
Yeah, and that's something that we saw at the beginning of the season, is that Roses had Abdu and Boychuk as a 1-2 punch kind of on the attack that again was catching a lot of teams off guard, and goalies too. But since Boychuk has been out, you see Abdu kind of being on an island alone. Nobody really connecting with her, and she's doing those runs. She's trying to create something, and it's just not working. She's, at times in the Toronto game, and I didn't see it as much in the Ottawa game, but in the Toronto game on Wednesday, it almost felt like she was forcing shots because she needed something. The team needed something to, like, kind of like, let's create something, and you start getting in those kind of desperate moments. You start getting desperate of like, we need to score something. We haven't scored in a long time, and it's the Tanya Boychuk. Her presence is really like her, I guess, her impact on the game is really missing right now. So a tale of two halves for me, Alex, in the game, at least Roses and Ottawa. I felt like at the first game and the first half, it was really Ottawa that was really dominating Roses FC in the game. And then the second half, it looked like Roses, with a few changes. There were a few subs that were also done in the game, that they kind of found the rhythm and that intensity that they've brought since the beginning of the season. And you saw the change right away. They scored that first goal, right? Kind of on a lucky bounce on the free kick, and yeah. So, but what about the midfield? Because Bibo, as you mentioned, on Wednesday she came out of the game with a concussion. So it's the first time Roses FC doesn't actually line up with a Bibo, which is a fantastic player. She's a great player, and we saw it game again, and it's just like, it felt like maybe this midfield, again, a tale of two halves. It felt like in the first half they were kind of missing Bibo's creativity or aggressiveness in the midfield, and was just being run down by Ottawa's midfield. What do you think of their midfield for Roses FC?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a big thing that stands out, is with no Bilbao, is like Montreal, one of the things they've done pretty well this year is get possession, get on the ball. And when you're missing, someone like Bilbao is kind of the heart of that. Like, she gets on the ball so well, she'll drop deep, she'll kind of be the creative force. It's okay in the build-up play, how do you do that? And it did stand out that Montreal ends up having to play a bit more direct without that. I mean, they finished with 41% possession. That's not really been their style of play this season. So no, I think it's definitely something where Bilbao was felt in that regard. Her absence was felt on the ball, because I think there's still quality in there. It's not just been Bilbao this year, but I think she kind of leads that regard. And I think we talked maybe as well about Abdu not seeing as much. You need that link right in the midfield, and I don't think we saw between Roy or Hess, or even Whitaker ends up coming.
Yeah, Whitaker was up there too. Yeah,
at halftime. I know she's been playing more of a fullback, playing on the wing as well. Maybe that role didn't suit her, and the fact they bring in Paquin, maybe you wonder if she could have started, right? Because I know Paquin's when I've seen Montreal play, she's always been a surprisingly, dynamic, fun winger to watch. It definitely felt like the midfield didn't connect with the attackers, and that maybe led to some of the problems we also talked about in the attacker section.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that you hope to see Bibo back as soon as possible, because she, as you said, is a big connection between the front. As the front is struggling right now, at least don't make it a midfield problem, because then you get stuck in the defense, and the defense was very vulnerable. Now on the defense, we started with as I mentioned a little bit earlier, with Leis and Hill on the back line. which was a change, right? Because it's usually been Kappa. I don't want to mess up her name, Capadonna, that's been there, and she came in as a sub because of an injury. But the defense again, and I've said this the past few games, it is looking very vulnerable the moment there is kind of pressure because they play very separate. And against AFC Toronto, they look like they would get Toronto would get them stuck in an island, the defenders, and it's obviously very. It causes a lot of issues and it causes a lot of one-on-ones with the goalie, which is not in any sport in any league. That's very tough to do. What'd you think of the defense today?
Yeah, I mean it was a weird one because, like you mentioned, I felt like early on, like it was it was fine. Like it's even as Ottawa was maybe applying the pressure early, but yeah, the big once they went up the goal, especially like it was a bit surprising because you wondered, okay, 1-0 on the road, maybe you sit back and you muck things up a little and slow the game down, and it felt like Ottawa's big chances all came when it was 1-0, and I guess that's a credit to Ottawa because as soon as the game state changed, they turned it up and started attacking. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's a few breakaways. I know. I think we'll talk about her in a minute. But Gabrielle Lambert was very busy, and I don't
Oh
think you
yeah,
want that from your
no.
goalkeeper. And I think that's something you mentioned with Montreal that you want to. I think that's been one of their strengths at times is being aggressive defensively and kind of playing on top of the opponent. But sometimes there is a time and a place, right? When you're up a goal and you're on the road, you kind of got to pick and choose your moment, especially when you're starting the league. And I think that did stand out. And I think the penalty almost doesn't end up as a surprise that it comes off such an aggressive action, right? From Hill, who kind of just bundles into the Ottawa attacker because it was just Montreal was just too aggressive for the lead they
Yeah,
were
what were
getting.
they doing, man? I mean, that I'm looking at that and I'm like, really? Like this is really what you don't need to do at this point. What was it, the 80? I'm sorry, we're talking about the 85th minute or something, almost the end of the game, where at this point, you just want to get the ball out of the box. You don't want to do more than that. And you see them be a little more aggressive than they need to be, and it's just like putting themselves in a bad position. To me, that really surprised me. I was like, well, that's as you said, new league, new coaches, new everything. There's bound to be, you know, terrible decisions like that one. I felt like Capadonna when she came in, because Leas was the one that left with an injury, which was big because she's been a big part of this back line along with Capadonna. She was being given the night off, I guess, because it's been continuous games. But her leaving and now Bibo leaving and now Boychuk leaving due to injury, it's starting to take a toll on this team, on this Roses FC team. These are very important players to this squad that obviously doesn't want to go on a bad road. Now this tie, obviously I think Alex, any team would say a tie on the road is kind of a win, but it doesn't really feel like a win. Similar to the CF Montreal, it is a tie and it should feel like a win against a very good team, but it doesn't feel like a win. It feels like Roses FC left 2 points on the table after this game, especially with something. What would you think of that if you saw it that way?
Yeah, well, I think it's same thing, right? Where when you take the lead and you give it away, and I think especially it's the way you give it away, the fact that it was coming from Ottawa, like had the penalty come out of nothing, you can kind of just be like, all right, that's football. You make a mistake. The fact that there were the warning signs, right, of there were the breakaways, Lambert's already kind of standing on her head. You're like, okay, like, you kind of want to, because I think how many? Lambert made four or three saves, but three big saves.
Huge
Uh,
saves, yeah.
Huge saves. Like there was the one on the breakaway again. I keep referencing. It was just incredible the way because I thought it was a goal for sure. I thought it was going to be 1-1 Ottawa. It was going to be those last 10, 15 minutes were going to be crazy. And she makes a big save. I was like, okay, maybe Montreal has a chance. Maybe that's the moment where they kind of realize, like, oh shoot, like let's tidy things up. But that's it. When the door was knocked for Ottawa, I think that's the frustrating part because it felt like Montreal could have adjusted and didn't. But like you mentioned, the injuries do add up in that regard. Where if you're losing some experience, maybe that's one where they'll look back and if Bilbo's on the pitch with the armband, she's there. Like, okay, guys, like what's going on? Let's settle it down. Because sometimes as a coach, it can be hard to, it's easy to say it, but then your players keep dropping deeper and deeper. Sometimes you need someone on the pitch to be like, all right, let's step up. Let's find our shape again. And Montreal, unfortunately, didn't do that.
Yeah, and let's just finish up with the goalkeeping because I know we talked about Lambert a lot already. Um, we actually had a question from Emil that asked us: is there any doubt that Gabriel Lambert should be Rose's starting goalkeeper going forward? It's tricky. It's tricky because both goalkeepers have such good quality. Lambert, I find that the Rose FC, at least what they've showed us so far, is that they like their goalkeeper to kind of play along with the defensive line, and I don't think Lambert is necessarily her strength lies in her feet, where she can necessarily help that build up or that wanting to attack. But she's a great shot stopper, as opposed to Karpenko that has been in some of the goals that she gave up was really misplaced or did some really silly mistakes while between on the net. So would you say it's undeniable that at this point Lambert should be the starter of this team?
Like today, a game like today would definitely give her the edge. I mean, Karpenko a bit younger, of course, different experience. The profile does help at the same time. Especially if Montreal trying to figure out the defensive line, having the experience of Lambert maybe can be an underrated factor, versus Karpenko. So I think definitely a game like this for Lambert shows that she can step up and be a bit more of that leader. And there's also could be positives too to having both kind of pushing each other. And I think that's something where it's not the worst thing either to have this competition, even if for now I think Lambert after this game kind of stoked out a key edge. Pardon me.
Yeah, it depends also on what the coach wants, right? If what fits their play, because Karpenko, again, like I said, yes, you're right, less experience, less of a high profile player, but does really well with the feet on her, with the ball on her feet. But I mean, you got to find a balance between the two, and hopefully one can teach the other, and they don't get stuck in their ways, right? So, um, but just to kind of finish up on the topic here, Alex, the reality is that Roses FC hasn't won the past 4 games. They've, if I look back here, they've drawn against Halifax, they've lost against Calgary and against Toronto, and now they tied against Ottawa today. Next up, they have Vancouver, right? So what's next, man? Like what's going on? Like what can Roses FC do to kind of change their luck around, turn this around for? I mean, it's very early in the season. We talked a little bit about talking about earlier in the season. It's very early in the season. Yeah, it is kind of early still for Roses FC. But what do you think they should do now to turn this around?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is just kind of get back to what worked early in the season. Like, play a little more with that, the possession, the attack. I think it feels like this Montreal team, they can be good defensively, but it feels like almost a good defense is a good attack kind of thing, right? Where if you can get those goals flowing and then and reset at the back, I think that's a big one. For what it's worth, this is really well timed that there's an international break, right? You get the weekend off. You have 2 weeks till your next game on June 7th. Um, I don't think Montreal's they haven't been hit as hard by the international call-ups as some of the other teams, right?
No,
Because I
I
know
don't think so. No.
Toronto, Vancouver lost or losing a few. So like Montreal kind of has a chance here where their injured players can get healthy. Those who are still around can keep training and get back. Maybe they just need a bit of a reset to find that system that works. So I think because of that, I think this comes at a really good time for them that they can just take this point reset and know that when it comes back after the break that they can be ready for a big home game against Vancouver too. And I think the fact that it's at home can be a big boost for Montreal.
Absolutely. You're right. They do have that break that could be a blessing in disguise because a lot of these players we need. Roses FC needs Boychuk back. They need Bibo back, hopefully as soon as possible, so that they can kind of get back on the horse and maybe find a different identity or try some things out during that window that could have maybe worked early on and don't work. And they want to kind of disguise it in a different way. But yeah, it's still early in the season, and hopefully at some point, Alex, it does become a problem for Roses FC to like have the call-ups of the international window, which is a good problem to have for any team. But look, I mean, we went through it quick. We appreciate you guys' patience. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. But a special thank you, Alex, for joining us tonight. Always enjoy having you on the show. I know it's every once in a while. You're welcome anytime. Um, where can our listeners find you, Alex?
Of course. Well, I mean, Andy, just thanks for the invite. I always enjoy talking with the Ballers Round folks. All you guys are always great to come on and chat about the football. I mean, it's great to hopefully see if Montreal can turn things around. 'Cause it's always nice to have them doing well, and of course the Roses. It's been nice to see them do good things. I love the kits. I love the team that they're building. So it's just always great to chat footy in Montreal. You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, mostly on Blue Sky, as you know, Alex Gonge Ruzik. And yeah, that's where I kind of be sharing most of my work, covering all things Canadian teams. But you know, I'm based here in Vancouver, so you usually get more of the Vancouver Whitecaps, you know, the CPL teams. That's what I'm covering most.
Is it raining right now in Vancouver?
It's beautiful, actually. Last weekend it was terrible, rainy. I went to a Vancouver FC CPL game where there was a lightning delay, and there's never lightning in Vancouver. And then
No.
this weekend it was 25 degrees or 20 degrees, perfect. So,
Oh
tale
my
of two
god.
weeks.
Oh my god. That Toronto game on Wednesday, freezing. Anyway, we're not going to discuss the weather because this is not a weather podcast. As always, the podcast will always be free to listen and watch on all of our platforms. Make sure to check out our Patreon page for exclusive member content and all of our social media platforms for more content. And follow my account as well as Elias as well as Alex for daily updates. Big shout out to all of you who joined the Patreon this week. And thank you again to all of you who tuned in tonight. And see you next week for episode 228 of The Ball is Round.